Silicon Valley porn star.
Yes.
What's this title about? Is it just about grabbing eyeballs, or is there more to this?
I looked at porn, and more than I wanted to. When I was getting the money and the cars and the women, I thought I was doing all the right things. And these were the ways that I thought society had told me I would be considered a successful man.
Why did you feel it was necessary to go public with all this information, given what's at stake?
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. Jason Portnoy is an author, entrepreneur, and venture capitalist. He was employee number 34 at PayPal and worked alongside groundbreaking tech and business leaders like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Steve Chen. Now, Jason visited Taipei to talk about his book, Silicon Valley Porn Star, which traces his journey through sex addiction and finding the true value of success. It has recently been published in traditional Chinese. Now, I caught up with Jason in Taipei to learn more about his meteoric rise, his fall from grace, and his long climb back. We also discussed his views on the startup landscape then and now. So, Jason, you were the 34th employee at PayPal in an era that feels like the crazy 90s of startups. What was the energy like in those days?
It was so exciting. Everything was growing, felt like everything was growing so fast, and new companies were getting started every day. And I was learning about stock options, and there was just all of this fascinating innovation happening very quickly. And it was just a really exciting time to be in Silicon Valley.
And can you tell us about the culture at PayPal and the World Domination Index, which I believe you mentioned in your book, which we'll be talking about very soon?
Yeah, sure. So yes, when I started, I think we had about 13,000 PayPal users or something like that. Pretty small number compared to today. There's well over hundreds of millions. And one of the engineers had built a small application that you could run on your computer that showed the World Domination Index, which was the number of accounts that we had. And you could watch it go up as you were working, or you could come back from lunch and you had more users. But just the name, the World Domination Index, I think also spoke a little bit to the culture, which was, I don't think we wanted to dominate the world, but we definitely felt like we were doing something that could change the world. And it was, for the PayPal stories specifically, it was, we're going to liberate capital financial flows globally. We're going to reduce the barriers to moving money around planet Earth. And, that was one of our first t-shirts. It was like a globe and money moving. And so, yeah, we definitely had ambitions. And a lot of people did.
So you were in your mid-20s when you worked at PayPal as vice president of financial planning and analysis.
Yeah.
How would you say PayPal's startup sensation how would you define or change your definition of success?
Success. Well, funny enough, I feel like I worked at PayPal. I started there in 1999. It's 2024. So we are, 25 something years later. It's still kind of defining my life, right? We're still talking about it, and people still want to talk about it. And we had a reunion a few years ago where we all gathered, and it was just amazing how tight-knit that group has been, and how it might actually define me for the rest of my life, which is really has been an interesting journey. But it was, the early success that I experienced was beyond anything that I imagined. And it was really disorienting, actually, to be in my 20s and to be making all of this money, and not just me making money, but being around people who are making a lot more money, amounts that I had never imagined when I was a kid. And so that was really fascinating, but also disorienting. Yeah.
I want to come back to that, but before I do that, I want to talk about your book, Silicon Valley Porn Star.
Yes.
So what's this title about? Is it just about grabbing eyeballs, or is there more to this?
There's more to it. It does both. I think it does grab eyeballs. There's nothing pornographic in the book, and I was not a porn star. Those are some of the early questions I get from people, so I'll just put that out there. But the title, I worked in Silicon Valley, and it defined my, the early part of my career, and as I've said, maybe for the rest of my life. The porn star name came from this life coach that I was working with, where at some point in this journey I went on that we'll talk about, I had told her that I looked at porn and more than I wanted to, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And I was struggling with that. And she nicknamed that part of me that was looking at porn star. And then she started asking me, how's porn star doing today? And then we both laughed. And actually, it's still funny, but making light of it made it easier to talk about, which then I was able to open up and really share. And then we were able to get to the bottom a little bit of like, well, why am I doing this? And what's driving this? And that was, that really helped me.
So your book talks about porn addiction, and then it spiraled into sex addiction, and basically a part of your life that you kept in the dark from many of those who you loved. So I want to ask you, how did you manage to have that quote unquote bad boy lifestyle, hold down a job, have your responsibilities to your family, and still kind of function every day?
I mean, I was just working really hard. I was just like scurrying around, and I feel like many of us probably know someone who's got secrets and maybe living a double life. I mean, it happens. It's all too common. And I think we just do our best. Anyone in that mode is compartmentalizing, and they're saying, well, this is one side of my life, this is another side of my life. But the behind the scenes, they're quite busy. It's quite exhausting.
I imagine.
I mean, I shouldn't make too much joke about it, because when I was in that mode, I wasn't happy. Yes, there were maybe fleeting moments of pleasure, but really at the end of the day, I was embarrassed. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed. And those are very heavy energies to carry around. And then once I finally started to process these things and let go of these things, and now I just feel so much lighter. So yeah, it was hard.
So we have a producer on our team called Fred.
Okay.
He also has a software startup, so he's trying to do both at the same time. And I believe he'll be very, very successful one day. But he wanted to ask you a question, asking, you work really hard, you put your everything into the startup, into your company, into your idea, and maybe it takes off. And then maybe you also want that kind of rock star lifestyle that goes with it, which is part of the attraction. How do you balance the two?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? It's like, what happens, this success that we're all trying to achieve, what happens when we get it? I think that if Fred were here, I would say a couple of things. Number one, you're creating this company, I believe, as a way of building a creation in the world. Like what draws us into entrepreneurship? I think we want to build a creation in the world that is a representation of us. We're kind of like the god of that creation in the early days, for sure. But then we're kind of giving birth to this creation, and we have to, it's not part of us. It is its own thing. It's its own organism. I talk about it. And so don't identify too much with it. Think of it more as a child. And what do we do with a child? We have to give the child what it needs to survive and thrive and grow. And then we have to get out of the way. And oftentimes what I see with entrepreneurs is they're so identified with their company and with their startup. It's such a part of their identity that sometimes they're not thinking clearly about how to go about, how it gets built. And also sometimes I feel like they become an impediment to the thing's growth. Instead of just saying, I'm going to give it what it needs and get out of the way, they're trying to control it. And if you're trying to control it, it can't get bigger than you. Mm-hmm. And so then there's all these limitations, and it gets a little bit philosophical, but this is the kind of conversation that I now have with entrepreneurs. It's a much more philosophical approach to how to build their companies.
And in retrospect, and this is another question from Fred, would you change the way you have done things given what you know now?
No.
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 Why not?
Because everything that I went through made me the person I am today, and I like the person I am today. It's been a crazy journey, but I can now have that conversation with an entrepreneur, or if an entrepreneur shares with me something that's going wrong, or that they're embarrassed about or that they're ashamed about. It's like, you don't have to be embarrassed in front of me or ashamed. You take a look at my book. I did all kinds of stuff that I was embarrassed and ashamed of. Let's just talk about it. There's no judgments here. Like, let's talk about it. And just by doing that, then people open up. And so anyway, I feel like I can only do that after having been on that journey. And so I guess I said one thing I would say to Fred, which was how to think about the company. The second thing is, okay, let's say you make some money. I think instead of thinking about cars and houses and whatever, and sure, I feel like people should have nice things. You want to buy a nice car, that's fine. But keep it in context. That car shouldn't define you or who you are. Your happiness shouldn't be dependent on that car. You shouldn't be looking to that car for validation from society or any of those things. If you want to enjoy it, that's wonderful, but keep it in context. We are here to grow as humans. We're here to expand our consciousness. We're building these companies and bringing these products to the world. And we can enjoy a nice car, but it shouldn't define who you are. Yeah.
You know, Jason, people do skyrocket to success, and perhaps not to the level that you reached. And many of them don't go down this slippery slope. Why do you think you did?
Oh, wow. Great question. I feel like in my case, I had some traumas when I was a child that I think I had a rocky foundation. My foundation didn't have integrity, and not integrity just in the sense of telling the truth, but integrity in the sense of it was not a stable building. It wasn't a stable foundation. There were holes in it. And so I talk about the traumas that I had, and we can talk about them if you'd like, but primarily I didn't understand how traumatic those things had been until I started to achieve some success. And then I started to kind of go off the deep end or, down some dark path. And only after hitting some rock bottom did I have to ask myself, why am I doing this? Where is this coming? What is driving me to do this? And I think maybe the success and the money amplifies that and kind of gives you the ability to indulge in those dark things. You can kind of hide your time, or you can hide where you're spending your money or something like that. And so yeah, that's how it worked out for me. But no, I think that my hope is that if someone's creating from a place where they do have a lot of integrity and they do have a strong foundation, that they won't, kind of fall into some of those traps. Unfortunately, so many of us do have difficult childhoods and we do have traumas. And so our foundations aren't totally solid. And so for those, for some, it's a kind of cautionary tale that, be careful what you wish for, because if you get some of that success and that inflates your ego, and now you have the money and the time to indulge in negative behaviors, they will call you. So be careful.
Point taken.
Yeah.
So your book goes through a lot of your journey,
yeah,
and some very, very, I guess, revealing and probably difficult things for a person to talk about. And like you said, you talk about things that brought on shame, and, people like who are close to you, and maybe one day your children, and then, of course, your wife would read this book or have read this book. Why did you feel it was necessary to go public with all this information, given what's at stake?
Yeah, sure.
Especially in your relationships, because, you're talking about sex and addiction and
infidelities and yes. No, it's a good question. Well, so I go through this whole thing. I achieve this success. I have this rocky foundation. I go down this dark path. I hit a rock bottom, and I have to reconcile all of these things. And I have to understand what's driving all of this. And I start to heal. And when I was getting the money and the cars and the women, I thought I was doing all the right things. And these were the ways that I thought society had told me I would be considered a successful man. And I had to start questioning that and letting go of that and finding that validation inside of myself. And so once I started to do that, and I started to be more content with who I was, maybe more secure with who I was, and content with where I was in life and what I had, I realized I don't really need much more. I don't need validation from society or attention from society or a woman or something like that. I have what I need. And so then what is left? The only thing that's left is to be in service to others. And so how can I be in service? I can tell my story because I know that there are people out there. I think it can be a cautionary tale for young people, but I have 2 kids. One's now a teenager. They don't want to hear it from me. Like, young people don't want to be warned. Like, the cliff is over there. Don't go over there. Then they're like, oh, really? Like, let me check it out. So I first thought that's who the book would be for, but really who it's resonated with are more middle-aged men, I would say, and women who've been through a difficult thing. Maybe they themselves found out in their 30s or 40s that they had an addiction that they had to confront, or they had a really bad marriage, divorce, or estrangement from a child, or a career setback. And I feel like for those people who wind up in a dark place unexpectedly, right? Because that's another part of this. I thought I was doing everything right. Mm-hmm. And then I find out, no, this is not right. And that was really disorienting. And there's a lot of people, I think, that find themselves in that situation. And I felt like this could be a little bit of a roadmap of like, well, I got there. My path was through this porn and sex thing. Your path might be different, but it's a universal story, right? You find yourself in a dark place. You're not sure how you got there. You're not sure why you got there, and you're not sure how to get out, and you feel alone. And so I just wanted to say, you're not alone. And here's how I got out. Maybe this can, shine some light.
Speaking of being in service, your book has been translated into traditional Chinese.
That's right, yes.
So I find that interesting.
The first other language after English, yeah.
It's the first language.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, first, why would you choose traditional Chinese? Because the scope is smaller as far as reach. But 2, in societies where traditional Chinese is used, often sex, addictions, and anything to do with a negative behavior is not often spoken about.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping, or what would your advice be to people in these societies?
Great questions. I think so. The first 2 are kind of related. So why Chinese, and because people don't want to really talk about these things, and they go together. So right after my book came out, I was continuing to work with this life coach, and I was having a call with her, and she said, hey, there's a woman that I know who lives in Taiwan, and I told her about your book, and she wants to translate it into Chinese. And would you be okay with that? And I was like, I think so. Yeah, let's have a conversation. And so I met this amazing woman, Jenny, and she proceeded to help me assemble a team. I mean, she really did all of it. Assembled a team, translators, cover designers, publisher, etc., to bring the book. And partly because she felt like people aren't talking about these things here, and I feel like we should be. And so I was like, yeah, let's do that.
And do you think you will be able to get that conversation started in this part of the world? I mean, I guess it's hard for you to gauge. You currently live in Japan?
Yeah.
How much interaction do you have with the entrepreneurs community at the moment, or in Asia, let's say?
Not much in Japan, a little bit in Singapore, because I lived there for a little while in 2017, and I'm invested in some things there. And actually, I'm going there after Taipei. But I think to the question, will we be able to start that conversation? It already started. So when my book came out, I got emails from people all over the world who had heard about it or heard me on a podcast. And specifically, I got emails from guys in Hong Kong. I got very recently had breakfast with a young man from Taiwan who had read the book, and it really affected him. And so I think the conversation's already started. And so, yeah, I hope we can continue to, shed some light, talk about this thing that's very uncomfortable, but also, I think even more importantly than just talking about the sex addiction and the porn addiction piece, that was like an entry point. That was my journey, and it was kind of very specific to me, but that was an entry point to learning all of these other lessons that then became very valuable lessons, not just in my personal life, but in my business life. As I went on this journey and healed myself and could interact with people with less agenda, I became better in business. I could sit with an entrepreneur, and instead of being worried about myself and how my investment was doing or whatever, all I cared about was them. And in fact, many times I cared more about them as a person than I cared about their company. Because
why is that a lesson from your journey?
Because I had to get to a place where I wasn't looking for attention, validation, security, safety, anything from the outside world. I had to, of course, I'm human. I still like some attention. And I'm not the 100% most secure person on planet Earth, but I am a lot more secure in who I am. I know myself a lot better, and I can interact with people with much less agenda because I don't need anything, or I need less. I'm not sure how to say it. It's a lifelong journey, right? Mm. And so anyway, I feel like it has made me a better investor. So if you want to be a venture investor, I think you could learn a lot by getting to a place where when you're interacting with an entrepreneur, you're not worried about yourself. You're not worried about your fund. You're not worried about any of you. All you care about is them. And they feel that energy. So as an investor, it's made me better. As a board member, same thing. I sit in a boardroom. Everyone's worried about stuff. But can I go in there and not have an agenda and just be very present? And it turns out when you pick up on so much stuff that you weren't picking up on before because you had all this distracting thoughts in your mind. So it's really helped me.
You took a huge risk revealing your journey and revealing it in so much details.
Yeah.
So publicly. Weren't you concerned about how people would not take you seriously in future as an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, or judge you even and say, I don't want to work with this guy?
Yeah, 100%. So but right before my book came out, I had this moment of panic where I went online and I deleted every blog post, Medium post. I unfriended from everyone on Facebook, disconnected from everyone on X and LinkedIn, and because I thought people were going to kind of disown me or distance themselves, like, I don't know this guy, because nobody knew what I was doing. I wasn't share it with anyone. So I was very scared that I would be judged or people would be ashamed to be associated with me. And it turned out it was kind of exactly the opposite. That when I went to this PayPal reunion, which happened not that long after the book came out, a lot of people had read it. I didn't even know, but apparently everyone was talking about it not through me, but just with each other. And so many people had read it and were just coming up to me and congratulating me and thanking me and super supportive. And then I do get a little bit embarrassed, if I meet someone and say oh, I Googled you and I saw your book. I'm like, okay, if that's the first thing they know of me, but no, I'm proud of it.
So speaking of the PayPal reunion, does that mean that nobody really knew this other side of you during that period?
Nobody knew. Because I did a good job of keeping my secrets.
You managed to compartmentalize all the different parts
100%, yeah. Yeah, wow, I guess I was good at that.
Yeah, very
embarrassing, but
very difficult thing to do also.
Yeah.
How much do you keep in touch with your old PayPal pals and the other entrepreneurs within that circle and the ones you kind of moved on with that also did groundbreaking things?
Yeah. Probably the person I've kept in touch with the most is Peter Thiel. So after PayPal, I went to work at his hedge fund. There was about 5 of us that did that. We started to build a family office for him because he was getting wealthier. I was the first CFO when he launched his VC fund, the Founders Fund. Then I was the first CFO at Palantir Technologies, which he was on the board and the main financial backer. So we had a really long career together. And then when I launched my fund, he really encouraged me and he became the biggest investor in my fund. And so we have had the most touch points. And before my book came out, I flew to visit him and I brought him a copy and I said, okay, Peter, it's a little scandalous topic here and you're mentioned. And I highlighted all the places he was mentioned so he could see. And he was like, no, this is good. And was really encouraging about it.
So given that, what would your advice be for entrepreneurs or, many people start a startup, it may not work, and then they move on to the next, or it may work and they moved on. What would your advice be about keeping those relationships?
They're so precious. And I feel like one of the things that was so powerful about the PayPal relationships was that the company succeeded and people went on to do lots of very interesting things. And so one piece of advice I usually give to young entrepreneurs, if you want to get into this ecosystem, and especially if you want to be a venture capitalist someday, which I hear a lot, young people like, I want to be a VC. I'm like, why? It's not all it's cracked up to be. But I often tell them, I never started a company. I mean, eventually I started a VC fund, but that was many years down the road. I didn't start out starting a company. I went to work at a Series B company, and that worked out really well. Like, I made a lot of money. I shouldn't start with that, but more importantly, I think
you'll get a lot of people with that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. People pay attention to that. Yeah. But I did a lot of work I was very proud of. I learned from a lot of very experienced mentors. And we weren't going to work every day worried about the company going out of business. Maybe there were moments there in the PayPal story for sure, but at a Series B, Series C stage company, you're less worried about going out of business and you're trying to figure out how to grow. And that, I think, is more durable knowledge that you can take with you to the next thing. So I often encourage people, don't just limit yourself to, I have to start a company or I have to work at a seed stage company to get enough equity or whatever, or responsibility. I started at a Series B company. The next company I went to, also a Series B company, Palantir Technologies. But because of that, I got to work with a lot of really amazing people, learn a lot. And most importantly, I got to learn what it looks like inside of a successful company that's growing very fast, which is a really interesting perspective, because when you're in a hyper growth company, the world looks very different. On the outside, it looks exciting, but when you're on the inside, everything's falling apart all the time. And there's this chaotic thing. But knowing what that looks like helped me invest, because then I could meet these companies and I knew what success would feel like. And so I could say, no, this doesn't feel like it. And also I was comparing the entrepreneurs and the founders to all these other people I had worked with who were such incredible creators. So I had a good way of gauging how successful they might be. And so that's kind of a piece of advice I would have. Like, those relationships are precious, and don't just limit yourself to super, super early stage.
Do you get tired of people asking you about Elon Musk?
It's okay. I know he's a thing, Yeah. He is a thing.
And if you had to say about his style of working, which you would say you took away, what would that be?
He just works so hard. And, and I love Elon. He was, I worked pretty closely with him for a period of time, a year or two, and he was always really great to me. And I love him a lot. I think he's done some amazing things. I know he's not perfect. I don't think we should expect people to be perfect. I think that's a little unfair. But he's such a hard worker. And he is very focused on the mission, and it's not personal for him, which I know has its pluses and minuses when you're working with him. But those are things I've taken away, because there are times, I think, in every startup where you have to do that. You have to say, you know what, this isn't about me. This isn't about you. This is about the mission. This is about this organism that we've created that is not us. It's bigger than us. We have to give it what it needs and get out of the way. And sometimes that feels impersonal to people. And I feel like he's done maybe he indexes really far on one extreme, but it's a good reminder sometimes that's what's needed to really break barriers.
Given that, I think in all professional environments, I think people always need that reminder that decisions are made not necessarily as a personal affront.
Yes.
So what would your advice be to young entrepreneurs as they're approaching businesses for funding or advice about taking things on the nose?
Yeah, I mean, don't take it personally. It's like, if you're going to do this, you actually, I shouldn't say don't take it personally. You get to choose. If you want to take it personally, take it personally. If you want to build a $1 billion business, go build a $1 billion business. If you want to build a smaller business that generates cash flow and you're happy with that, that's still entrepreneurship. Like, entrepreneurship doesn't have to mean starting the next Google, right? Entrepreneurship can mean starting a coffee shop. So I think expanding the definition of entrepreneurship and saying there's no one size fits all strategy, you get to choose. And so if people are going to give you feedback and you want to take that personally, that's okay. That's part of your journey. And yeah.
LinkedIn, YouTube, SpaceX, Palantir.
Isn't that incredible?
Massive, exactly.
Isn't that incredible?
Like, groundbreaking.
I
And
know.
It's not just big companies, it's groundbreaking.
I mean, earth-changing
From
companies.
PayPal.
Yes.
You were involved in a lot of those.
Yeah.
What was it about this PayPal group or your experience there that made people skyrocket?
This is like the question I get for 25 years. I don't 100% know. I don't know if any of us really know exactly, but there's something about we came together. It was this assembly of talent. And I do think, Peter, Max Levchin, Elon, like the very, core founders, they definitely had a different way of looking at the world. And they definitely were attracted to each other. And so they started to attract other, molecules that were kind of similar to them. And so I do think it was a culture of people that were really looking at the world in a very different way, who maybe on their own felt a little bit like outsiders in the world because their perspective was different. But together they found that there was a camaraderie that is like, oh, outside these walls, I'm kind of not an outcast, but like I kind of don't feel like I fit in. But inside of these walls, you're like me, and we were having so much fun like that. So I don't know what it was. Oh, and so then we all like supporting each other in that growth, and then we all exploded out. It was crazy.
Co-founder of YouTube, Steve Chen, has now moved to Taiwan.
Love Steve.
Are you planning to see him?
I was trying to see Steve. He's not here right now, so I can't see him.
Shame.
But
I'm sure paths will cross at some point. We're just about running out of time, but I want to ask you, what would you want the big takeaway to be from your book? And on two fronts. One, for entrepreneurs, people who are starting out, people who have big dreams of creating something in this world. And two, for people who just are trying to get by.
Yeah, right. Well, for the first group, I feel the entrepreneurs, I think that I had to get to a place where, I thought that the mark of being successful for me was going to be money, cars, and women. I list those three in the book all the time. Money, cars, and women. That's what I need to do. Whether it's media, society, magazine, who knows why I felt that way. I had to question that. And so my advice, again, the young people don't want to hear the advice, but at least if I could get in their head for a second, question that, question your motives, don't be looking for that validation, create from a place of integrity, of security and integrity and a strong foundation, because if you do, you'll be a better leader. If your company grows, you will be a better leader because you'll be leading from a place of integrity, not from a place where you're trying to take because you need attention or validation. And that's a different kind of leadership. And I would like to encourage, leadership from a place of integrity. For the people who are trying to get by, I sympathize, like if you're struggling with something, or maybe you have some secrets and you're not sure if you should share them, and there's all kinds of things that people are doing. And my advice is, find a place where you can get back to your integrity, whether it's a therapist, a coach. It's not a friend, it's not a parent, it's not a coworker. It's, someone outside of your sphere that can be a trusted place where you can process those things and get back in your integrity and feel that lightness and freedom that comes with living a life of integrity.
I love that word integrity, but I feel like is just not a value that people talk about enough. And I think it's so important. If you had to,
I think they're missing out if they're not talking about it or not thinking about it. Like I do feel like it leads to that feeling good, right? And that's the thing I feel like people are looking for. Like, I want to be happy. It's like, well, I think happy is a fleeting emotion. I think what you're really saying is you want to be at peace, or you want to have some serenity in your life. And I feel like that comes from having that integrity.
So if you finally had to, I mean, you're doing all kinds of things right now and spending a lot of time with your family, which is wonderful to hear. But if you had to define yourself as who you are right now, both professionally and personally, how would you describe yourself as a parting shot for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So the first word I use is human. I am, I'd like to start there as a baseline. Someone asked me recently, in the US, are you a Democrat or you're a Republican? I said, I'm a human. Let's start there first. So I really feel like, we joke, but that's kind of where my focus is like, how can I be in service? How can we all be in service to each other? And wouldn't it be a better world if we were all walking around, instead of asking what's in it for me, walking around saying, how can I be in service to you? How can I help you? And the only way to do that is to be healed. So like doing self-work, giving yourself love, whatever, that's not selfish. That puts you in a place where you can do that. And so that's one of my primary focuses right now, is how can I be in service to my kids, to my wife, to the companies that I'm involved with. And I really feel like my family's not more important than my work's not more important than my family. I think that I've gone through both extremes over the last few decades and realized that the two have to stay roughly in balance for me to feel really fulfilled and happy. Because when I went all family, I missed the excitement and the challenges and the work of building things and that creative outlet of building things and companies. And so I really feel like where I am right now is trying to be a good human, trying to be in service, and trying to keep these things in balance.
So does that mean there's going to be a book too?
I don't know. I think about it. Sometimes I feel like it'd be fun to write about...
You can't call it porn star again, can you?
No, I don't think so. But I feel like it'd be good to write about how all the things I learned translated into my business life. Because that, I think, people don't expect that. A lot of times they hear about personal development, self-work, whatever you want to call it, and they think, well, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy building my company. And I say, no. You have to get that stuff right if you want to build a big company, because that's your foundation. And I think that could be an interesting book.
Jason Portnoy, human venture capitalist.
Sweet.
It has been fantastic to speak to you. Thank you so much for taking the time and speaking so frankly. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was our interview with Jason Portnoy in Taipei, talking about his book, Silicon Valley Porn Star, as well as his entrepreneurial and personal journey. For our viewers everywhere, it's been great to have your company. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode or wish to add to the dialogue, do join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.